suffering is really coming from the word to allow. We suffer because we don't allow. So when Christ, for example, said, suffer the children to come unto me, what he was really saying is release the child from being in bondage or being blocked from being able to express itself fully. The cause of suffering is limitation, or not being able to, or being blocked from just being oneself fully and having nothing to block oneself from that fullness. On our way there, in the Holy Souls realm, we expand into a bigger universe where we have no physical limitation. Take them on a luminescent body that is able to mutate itself to some extent and go through barriers, for example, and not have physical injury. And if it does, it would be mild and it could heal itself quite rapidly. It might be enough to kind of just let one know that, you're injuring yourself and to watch in the future. And you have some degree of emotional loss or missing things, for example. But the way we understand the Bible is there is no more crying, there's no more death. But in the Holy Souls realm, we understand ultimately there's no death. But in the Holy Souls realm, it's thought that people would live on average to about 1,000 years. Then in the pneumatic realm, we already talked about this, the suffering even dissipates even more. We would say in the Holy Souls realm, there is no suffering because everything is allowed already. There's a term called women's suffrage, which is a good way of describing what the word suffering really means. In other words, women are not blocked from voting. They're allowed to vote. There are no limitations on their liberation. That's really what women's suffrage means. It means to be released from, to be allowed to, from limitations and blockage, which causes harm, really. Suffering is another way of Christ saying, suffer the children to come unto me, is another way of saying, allow the children to be healed. Allow the children to walk away from harm, from the things that cause harm. That's really the root etymology of that meaning, the truest meaning. But in this realm, we have come to understand a different way of seeing that word. But in the Holy Souls realm, we'll no longer have that way of understanding suffering, as our knowledge will be greater and we'll be able to appreciate the things that we're experiencing in a much better way and not judge them through laws as right or wrong, rather as growing in wisdom or in Sophia and in the Christ and Gnostic, you see. Because of that, it will result in more health, well-being, wiser choices that then will allow us to live longer and longer. And then eventually, as the wisdom grows and the Gnosis grows, we become almost infinite, and then eventually infinite, meaning eternal. And then we'll eventually be able to understand what causes us to deteriorate, dissipate, and die. What causes us to have concrete, dense bodies that have unnecessary amounts of, as you call here, suffering or pain when it just gets its knee hit against a piece of wood, for example. So this is the way Gnostics would understand this understanding of suffering.